Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Monday, September 30th, 2024. All right, so the big news from the weekend, which I'm sure you're all aware of at this point, was the Israeli killing of Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah. He was killed by Israeli strikes on Friday. As I understand it, Israel dropped a whole bunch of 2,000-pound bunker-busting bombs onto residential buildings in the southern suburbs of Beirut, and Nasrallah was underground in some sort of bunker under those buildings. And this was on Friday. And then on Saturday, Hezbollah confirmed that he was killed. So Israel has taken out the top leadership of Hezbollah, and they've continued to really pound Lebanon with airstrikes. On Sunday, over 100 people were killed. So we're going to get into all that. But first, we're going to start with a few things about the situation in the region, the chances of escalation. So the first story at the top of antiwar.com today: the U.S. bolsters forces in the Middle East and warns Iran. So the Pentagon on Sunday announced steps to bolster its forces in the Middle East amid Israel's nonstop bombardment of Lebanon. Pentagon spokesman Major General Pat Ryder said the U.S. will reinforce its air support capabilities in the coming days, and said Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, quote, increased the readiness of additional U.S. forces to deploy, elevating our preparedness to respond to various contingencies, end quote. So increasing air support capabilities and what it sounds like putting troops on standby for deployment. So Ryder said that Austin also ordered the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln and its strike group to stay in the region, and the USS Wasp Amphibious Ready Group Marine Expeditionary Unit will also continue to operate in the Eastern Mediterranean. Ryder also issued a warning to Iran in the statement. He said, quote, Secretary Austin stressed that the United States is determined to prevent Iran and Iranian-backed partners and proxies from exploiting the situation or expanding the conflict. Secretary Austin made clear that should Iran, its partners, or its proxies use this moment to target American personnel or interests in the region, the United States will take every necessary measure to defend our people, end quote, except for pulling them out of there. So the U.S. has been vowing to defend Israel from any potential Iranian attack, and the Pentagon said last week that was one purpose of maintaining an increased force posture in the Middle East. They said it explicitly last week, and they've been saying this for a while now, that if Israel comes under another Iranian attack, the U.S. will defend Israel, directly intervene. And if the situation with Hezbollah, with Lebanon, or whoever else, if Israel needs help, if it gets to that point, the U.S. is saying that they'll intervene to defend Israel. So Nasrallah was killed alongside a senior IRGC commander, a senior Iranian member of the IRGC. And Iran is vowing that they're going to respond to that. Iran has not responded to the Israeli assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, the Hamas's political chief who was killed in Tehran. They didn't respond to that, and now they're saying that they're going to respond to this. So, there's a chance something might happen, but it's not really clear. Again, Israel has really put the hurt on Hezbollah. It goes to show their intelligence capabilities. They definitely penetrated, Hezbollah and southern Lebanon intelligence-wise. So it's just, it's not clear what the next few days are going to be like. Again, we'll get more into the Israel-Lebanon side in other stories here, but it's just a lot of ways that this thing can go, I think. And, of course, the Israeli killing of Nasrallah and the Israeli slaughter of civilians in Lebanon, that could also provoke attacks on U.S. bases in the region, in Syria and Iraq. I mean, the U.S. troops that are there are basically sitting ducks. And, I think there's a big possibility that, Iran doesn't have to do anything for those bases to come under attack. The Shia militias in Iraq and Syria, some of them don't even really listen to Iran as it is, and they might be fed up with Iran's lack of action and take it upon themselves to try to at least hit some Americans. I know that they are firing missiles and drones toward Israel. I don't think that they've done any damage, but they are getting in on those attacks. All right, so the next one here, Israel bombs Yemen's Hodeidah port, killing at least 4. So the Israeli military conducted airstrikes against Yemen's Red Sea port of Hodeidah on Sunday, killing at least 4 people and wounding 29. Yemen's health ministry said the death toll is preliminary and could rise. The strikes hit port facilities, a power generation plant, and the Hodeidah airport. The Israeli military said it carried out the strikes in response to the Houthis firing missiles toward Israel. On Friday, the Houthis claimed they launched attacks on Israeli cities and several U.S. warships. Dozens of Israeli warplanes were involved in the strikes on Hodeidah, which the Israeli military said targeted port and oil facilities and sensitive Houthi military sites. U.S. and Israeli officials told Axios that Israel notified U.S. Central Command ahead of the strikes, so it was coordinated with the U.S. And since January, the U.S. has been bombing Yemen as part of this new campaign that has failed to stop Houthi attacks on shipping and Houthi attacks on Israel now. So Israel bombed Yemen for the first time back in July in response to a Houthi drone attack on Tel Aviv that killed 1 civilian. The Israeli Air Force also targeted Hodeidah in July, hitting oil infrastructure, and they killed 6 civilians in that strike. So this is, this isn't going to deter the Houthis. They're just going to keep doing what they can to try to hit Israel, to try to hit the shipping. So, this is something that we might start to see more often, is because it does seem like the Houthis have been able to get missiles and drones closer to Israel, or they've gotten a few past the air defenses. I'm sure they're going to keep it up. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. is not withdrawing from Iraq. So the U.S. and Iraq on Friday announced a plan that will end the mission of the U.S.-led anti-ISIS coalition in Iraq, but U.S. troops will remain in the country under a bilateral security partnership. So this is pretty much what I expected to happen. This was the big announcement. We are hearing all these reports that the U.S. and Iraq were planning some big announcement that could be a U.S. withdrawal. But from the way I read it, I was pretty pessimistic that the U.S. was doing everything they could to stay in Iraq. So they come out with this big announcement, and it is basically, there's no details on if any, there's 2,500 U.S. troops in Iraq, no details if any of them are going to leave. Iraqi security officials told the Associated Press that U.S. troops would be withdrawing from a base at the Baghdad International Airport and the Ain al-Assad Air Base in western Iraq, but U.S. officials refused to say how many of the 2,500 troops that are in Iraq, if any of them, are going to actually be leaving the country. And even them, leaving those bases, that wasn't in the announcement. So, the U.S. might be trying to finagle how to keep those bases as well. Pentagon spokeswoman Sabrina Singh, she said it as clear as possible on Friday. She was asked, is the U.S. going to withdraw from Iraq? And she said, quote, "The U.S. is not withdrawing from Iraq," end quote. She said that the U.S. would be changing its footprint in the country, but would not share any details. She said, quote, "This is a step in our relationship and a progress toward a bilateral security agreement, and we'll have more details to share when we are ready," end quote. So under the plan, the anti-ISIS coalition in Iraq will officially end its mission by September 2025, but it will continue to operate in Syria and be supported from Iraqi territory until September 2026. So that's the thing. The U.S. needs to stay in Iraq if it wants to stay in Syria. The U.S. presence in Iraq supports the occupation of eastern Syria. So they're saying that, I guess, the coalition is still going to operate in Syria until 2026. It's going to end its mission, but I'm sure that who knows what things are going to be like by then. The U.S. probably has no plans on actually leaving Syria. It's just like Iraq here. So this plan, this is not going to placate the factions in Iraq that want the U.S. to leave, which includes the Shiite political parties and militias, but also includes a lot of other people that don't want the U.S. in Iraq for very good reason, considering the history. It's not just the Iranian-aligned Shias. There's all sorts of people who don't want the U.S. there. And the reason why they're able to stay is that the U.S. has enormous control over Iraq's economy. They control their foreign reserves. They can basically destroy their currency. They can sanction them, and really hurt the economy. So they're essentially holding the country hostage. Iraq's Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani, he began calling for an end to the U.S. military presence earlier this year after an escalation between the U.S. and the PMF. I know I go over this stuff a lot, but the context is important. In 2020, the Iraqi government, the Iraqi parliament, voted to expel the U.S. after the Soleimani assassination. And so one thing, this is another factor here. You have these Shia militias who want the U.S. to leave. The Iraqi government got them to stop attacking U.S. bases after the 3 troops were killed at Tower 22 in Jordan. And Iran also got them to stop. But I'm sure, we don't know exactly the details of that agreement. I am sure that part of it was the Iraqi government telling them, we're going to get the U.S. out of here. We're going to negotiate a deal. So now we have the big announcement, and it's what I suspected, that they're not actually going to leave. On top of the Nasrallah killing and Israel killing hundreds of people in Lebanon, nearly 1,000 at this point, just in the past week. All this is brewing. I think we might start to see some big attacks on these U.S. bases. All right, so I want to mention our sponsor for today's show, and that is the Expat Money Summit, and this is coming up soon, October 7th to the 11th. I can't believe it's almost October already, but the Expat Money Summit, it is the world's largest offshore event taking place entirely online from October 7th to 11th, hosted by Mikkel Thorup. He's the host of the Expat Money Show and a highly sought-after expat consultant. At this summit, you will discover why international diversification is a must for those looking to preserve their liberty and wealth. Learn everything you need to know about crafting your perfect plan B, how to quickly acquire a second passport, diversify your finances offshore, invest in international real estate, and get in-depth insights in geopolitics from world-renowned experts. Headline speakers include Dr. Ron Paul, Doug Casey, Scott Horton, Tom Woods, Mark Faber, Tom Luongo, and many others. To reserve your complimentary ticket, head over to expatmoneysummit.com. That is expatmoneysummit.com. And if you're interested in getting a VIP ticket, which will give you access to a lot of great panels, one of those panels I will be doing along with Kyle Anzalone and Hrove Morich from the Geopolitics and Empire podcast. We're going to be discussing the risk of World War III. Is it fear-mongering or is it genuine concern? So again, October 7th to the 11th, so it's coming up. So if you didn't get a ticket, go to expatmoneysummit.com, or if you want the VIP, click the link in the description to get a nice discount. All right, so back to the news here. Biden and Harris strongly back Israeli killing of Nasrallah. So on Saturday, both President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris released statements strongly backing the Israeli assassination of Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah, which was carried out using U.S.-provided 2,000-pound bombs. President Biden said in a statement that Nasrallah's death was, quote, a measure of justice for his many victims, including thousands of Americans, Israelis, and Lebanese civilians, end quote. The president said that the U.S., quote, fully supports Israel's right to defend itself against Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and any other Iranian-supported terrorist groups, end quote. Biden said that he ordered Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin to send additional military assets to the region. He said, quote, I directed my Secretary of Defense to further enhance the defense posture of U.S. military force in the Middle East region to deter aggression and reduce the risk of a broader regional war, end quote. So Biden again claimed that he seeks de-escalation in the region, but his administration has continued to provide military aid and other types of support for Israel since it began its dramatic escalation in Lebanon. So you see this one picture here of the aftermath of this strike. I mean, this is where tall residential buildings were standing. I mean, they decimated basically an entire residential block to kill Nasrallah. There hasn't been, the last I saw, some reports said there's been 6 confirmed deaths in the strike. I saw 11. I know that they're still digging bodies out of the rubble, but if these buildings were full of people when they destroyed them, I would think the number of dead would be much higher. Again, it's probably going to go up as they're digging people out of the rubble, or maybe it was empty. Maybe people knew to stay out of there. I don't really know exactly, but we might see that death toll go up again. I mean, it's just they say Israeli officials were threatening to turn Beirut into Gaza, and it looks like that's what they're starting to do. So Harris said she released a similar statement saying that there's been a measure of justice for Hezbollah's victims. She said that she has an unwavering commitment to the security of Israel, and said, quote, "I will always support Israel's right to defend itself against Iran and Iran-backed terrorist groups such as Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis," end quote. Very similar statement. And Harris also claimed that the administration was working for a diplomatic solution, but the day before Nasrallah was killed, Netanyahu rejected a U.S.-backed ceasefire proposal, and the U.S. gave Israel $8.7 billion in military aid, so not really pushing very hard. Israeli officials said that they decided to kill Nasrallah because he would not separate the situation at the Israel-Lebanon border from Gaza. He would not negotiate a diplomatic settlement unless there was a ceasefire in Gaza. That was something Hezbollah always made clear, that they would stop attacks on northern Israel if there was a ceasefire in Gaza. And it's another thing, that Biden has been claiming that he wants a ceasefire in Gaza, and that's something that would have cooled down all the tensions, but he didn't actually push for it because he's continued to give Israel everything that it wants. So the Israeli airstrike also killed Abbas Nilforushan, who was the senior IRGC commander who I mentioned before. And this, I just get into this story about how things could spiral out of control here again. But again, Israel really has decimated Hezbollah, at least at the leadership level. First with maybe this was probably lower level guys, but with the pager attack, which also killed civilians and hurt civilians, the walkie-talkie attack, and then you had the really heavy bombing. The first day that they really ramped up the strikes, they bombed, civilian homes that they claimed there was Hezbollah missiles there. So they've just been slaughtering Lebanese civilians and also taking out senior Hezbollah commanders. Again, it goes to show Israel's intelligence reach in Lebanon. If they could plant a bomb or launch a drone strike in Tehran to kill the Hamas leader over there, it makes sense that they have a lot of intelligence capabilities in a neighboring country like Lebanon. So now to get into the next story here, Israel amasses troops, tanks on Lebanon border as strikes continue. So we've seen still rocket and some missiles fired from Lebanon. So, Hezbollah is going to continue fighting. The question is at what level. Israel has amassed more troops and tanks on the Lebanon border in recent days as it continues to pound Beirut and other areas of the country, killing over 100 people on Saturday and Sunday. So U.S. officials told ABC News on Saturday that they believe Israel is preparing for a limited ground incursion into southern Lebanon, even after it has decimated Hezbollah's leadership. On Sunday, U.S. officials told ABC that small-scale raids to take out Hezbollah positions right across the border may have already started. They're saying little commando raids might have started already. They're saying this is going to be a limited ground incursion, but there's a chance that they're going to face some pretty serious resistance, and if they start taking casualties on the ground, things are going to escalate. We'll see. Time will tell how this goes for Israel, if they do go ahead with these ground incursions or if they're already happening like these U.S. officials say. ABC report said that Israel is not listening to U.S. calls for de-escalation and diplomacy, but those are not genuine calls because, again, the U.S. continues to give them weapons to do what they're doing in Lebanon. So to get into the casualties here, Lebanon's health ministry said Sunday that at least 105 people were killed in another day of Israeli bombing, which targeted Beirut, eastern Lebanon, and southern Lebanon. And according to Al Jazeera, there was a strike in southern Lebanon that hit 2 residential buildings and killed at least 32 people. On Saturday, the health ministry said at least 33 people were killed by Israeli airstrikes across Lebanon. So the Lebanese government released figures on Sunday of the total casualties in Lebanon that have been inflicted by Israel over the past year. It said that since October 8th, 2023, that was when Hezbollah fired some rockets into Israel, 1,640 people, including 104 children and 194 women, have been killed, and 8,408 have been wounded. At least 816 of those killed have been killed since September 23rd. So since that escalation last week, 816. And now that number is probably a little higher now. So again, just lots of people are being killed here in Lebanon. And there's no sign that this is going to slow down. I posted the Al Jazeera live updates just because, Israel is continuing to carry out very heavy airstrikes in Lebanon. So let's see what some of these live updates are. The West Bank, Israeli forces are launching more raids in the West Bank, carrying out arrests. Israeli military says that it launched air attacks on Hezbollah in Bekaa, so that's more airstrikes in Lebanon. So this is early in the morning over there while I'm recording this. They bombed a school in Gaza. I mean, man, it is just, again, this is all being done with U.S. taxpayer dollars and all these weapons that our government is shipping over there. This wouldn't be possible without all that. And it's just so much destruction and death. All right, so the next one here. Israel kills 61 in Gaza over 3 days. So Israeli forces have killed at least 61 Palestinians in Gaza over the past 3 days, according to numbers released by Gaza's health ministry. On Saturday, the ministry said that 52 Palestinians were killed and 118 were wounded in the previous 48-hour period. I don't think they put out an update on Friday because that's their holy day. On Sunday, the ministry said that 9 were killed and 41 were injured in the previous 24-hour period. So the latest violence brings the health ministry's death toll to 41,595. And that is an undercount of actually how many people have been killed because it doesn't count the people under the rubble. And we don't know how many indirect deaths there have been. It could be much. We know it's higher. It could be significantly higher. And so, again, they said 9 in the previous 24 hours on Sunday. And then later on Sunday, Al Jazeera reported, citing medical officials, that at least 28 Palestinians had been killed throughout the whole day on Sunday. The health ministry puts out the update kind of early in the day so that it doesn't include all the people actually killed that day. So the violence continued, very heavy airstrikes in Gaza on Sunday. One of the strikes targeted a school that was sheltering displaced Palestinians in the northern town of Beit Lahia, killing at least 4 people and wounding 14. And children were among the casualties there. So this is going on just with much less attention is on Gaza right now. This is another benefit for Netanyahu, getting his war in Lebanon. He's going to have a much freer hand in Gaza. Much less attention is on Gaza right now. And we know that they've been considering the ethnic cleansing plan for the north. So, not good for the Palestinians. All right. So the next one here, Netanyahu says that Israel's fighting on 7 fronts. So Kyle Anzalone wrote this up on Friday, and this was Netanyahu's speech at the UN in New York. And it was actually right after this speech, he went back to his hotel and he ordered the airstrike that killed Nasrallah. So very symbolic. They did a little photo shoot of him ordering the strike. And again, this is as, Biden, Blinken, all these U.S. officials saying, oh, we want de-escalation, we want diplomacy. And then Netanyahu gives this whole speech at the General Assembly and goes and orders an airstrike from the U.S. using U.S. bombs. Just completely, it's just a joke, this idea that Biden, any of these officials in the Biden administration are really pushing for de-escalation. During the speech, he called the UN General Assembly a swamp of anti-Semitic bile. He went on to slam the International Criminal Court for considering charging him with war crimes. And he also presented 2 maps. He's always very visual, Netanyahu, and he held up 2 maps, and one was titled The Blessing and the other The Curse. And the blessing, he pointed to the Gulf Arab states, saying that they're the blessing, and that if Saudi Arabia established diplomatic ties with Israel, that they would receive a blessing. And then, of course, the curse is Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon. That's the curse. I mean, it's kind of silly. But the funny thing about it is that he holds up this map of Saudi Arabia, And the Saudis weren't there. They walked out. A lot of people walked out on his speech. But this is, just this maniac comes and gives this big speech and then orders this huge bombing. It's just a disgrace, again, that our government is supporting this guy as he slaughters so many people. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. kills at least 37 in recent Syria strikes. So this article is from Jason Ditz. U.S. Central Command has reported killing at least 37 in substantial airstrikes against different militant factions in Syria. The strikes were reportedly on September 16th and last Tuesday on September 24th. The first strike was carried out against an ISIS training camp somewhere in central Syria. That strike reportedly killed 28 people and was meant to disrupt the ability of ISIS. Tuesday's strike was in northwestern Syria, where Islamist factions continue to hold substantial sway. This is Idlib he's talking about, and that is controlled by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, formerly the al-Nusra Front, which was al-Qaeda in Syria. It's still led by al-Julani, who was the leader of al-Qaeda. But they targeted Haras al-Din, which is a different al-Qaeda affiliate that operates in Idlib. Sometimes HTS fights against Haras al-Din. I suspect that the U.S. might get intelligence from Haras al-Din from the HTS, from the other al-Qaeda guys. That's just a hunch that I have, but it's just a mess. So the U.S. Launched some pretty heavy airstrikes, it looks like. And Jason mentions there was some celebrations in the in Idlib, which is controlled by HTS. Some people were celebrating that Nasrallah was killed because, of course, Hezbollah fought against the al-Qaeda guys in Syria. I think there was a lot of fake videos going around. You see videos on Twitter of people saying, oh, look at all these Syrians celebrating Nasrallah's death. But then it turns out to be like a video from a wedding or something from a few years ago. But it did look like there were some celebrations. Again, and this is an area controlled by al-Qaeda. There actually were reports, I forgot that this was in here, that a U.S. base at Conoco, this is from the Cradle, came under rocket and drone strikes and rocket and drone attacks in Syria on Sunday. So we'll see if more comes out about this. So for now, we haven't seen any confirmation from the U.S. side. All right, so the next one here, former Netanyahu rival joins Israeli cabinet. This article is from Al Jazeera. So Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has announced that his former rival, Gideon Sa'ar, is joining the Israeli cabinet, a move that will boost the government coalition and bolster its support in the country's parliament. The hawkish Sa'ar will serve as a minister without a portfolio, the Prime Minister said on Sunday. His inclusion in the government coalition takes its support in the 120 Israeli-seat parliament from 64 to 68, weakening the de facto veto power that far-right parties have over the cabinet. The move comes as Israel intensifies its attacks on Lebanon, Gaza, and across the Middle East in what is increasingly looking like a wider regional war. Sa'ar has been one of Netanyahu's most vocal critics in recent years, but the Israeli prime minister suggested that the two politicians have been on the same page since the start of the war on Gaza. He said, quote, Gideon has accepted my request and agreed to return to the government, end quote. So basically, this shows right now what Netanyahu's doing in Lebanon is very popular domestically. He's going up in the polls since he started escalating in Lebanon. He's killed Nasrallah. So he's popular again because, after October 7th and his refusal to make a hostage and ceasefire deal, there's still protests for him to reach a hostage deal with Hamas. But overall, it looks like he's getting support back because of this escalation in Lebanon, and now his governing coalition has grown, which means that if one of those factions wants to quit, it doesn't necessarily mean that the government would be dissolved and they would have to have new elections. All right, so the last one here, Zelensky says that Trump assured him he would support Ukraine. So Zelensky told Fox News that former President Donald Trump reassured him that Washington will maintain support for Kiev should he return to the White House. So the Ukrainian leader said that Trump made the remarks when the two met last week. This was this past Friday that they met after Trump criticized Zelensky for not reaching a deal with Russia to end the war. Zelensky said, quote, "I don't know what will be after the elections and who will be president, but I've got from Donald Trump very direct information that he will be on our side, that he will support Ukraine," end quote. So let's hope Trump was just trying to make Zelensky happy, or that Zelensky, overstated it a little bit. But he's saying that he's got assurances from Trump here when it comes to Ukraine. But, who knows what that means. I don't think they're going to be able to sustain this thing for too much longer, even if even if Harris wins in November. I think there might be a reality check for Zelensky after November, either way. But hopefully Trump, he's got, and J.D. Vance keep thinking keep thinking about ending the war if they come in next year. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from Doug Bandow: can the U.S. be accused of meddling in Georgia's election? One from Connor Freeman: will Americans pay for Israel's crimes again? One from Hussein Askari: why does the U.S. still control every penny of Iraqi oil revenues? Kind of about what I was talking about, how the U.S. has basically complete economic control over Iraq. One from James Weil: Condoleezza Rice won't learn. And one from Aaron Mate: in Lebanon carnage, Biden deepens U.S. obligation to Israeli aggression. So please go check all of that out. If you want to support this show, share it. Tell your friends about antiwar.com. Like, subscribe, comment, follow us on social media. All that stuff helps out. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.